Oh, behave. What's up and welcome back. I'm John Stark from MacMovieGuy.com, your favorite blind film critic. Don't worry, I'm not going to spend the whole time doing an Austin Powers impersonation. I'm not one of those people. But throw me a freaking bone here. This is Austin Powers, International Man of Mystery. And in case you're wondering, why, sir, have you chosen to review this all of a sudden? Well, I've been doing a lot of anniversary releases, and you're like, but, sir, this movie came out in 1997, and I'm like, yeah, and no one cared. Zero, zero were given about this film. So, this movie made $53 million dollars at the box office. The reason I'm reviewing it and why I decided to go ahead and review the trilogy is because the real winner here is Austin Powers' The Spy Who Shagged Me, which came out in 1999 and is celebrating its 25th anniversary, which made over $200 million dollars at the box office, 4 times as much as the first film. Really sort of setting forth the whole reason why there's a third film. It's actually kind of amazing that they made a second film because the first film made 53 with like a $60 million international, but like gross. So it's not really something that set the box office on fire in 1997. Not really something that you go, hey, we should make a sequel off of this. But they did, and luckily they did because The Spy Who Shagged Me ended up being a huge hit. And part of that was because Austin Powers was one of those films that sort of grew with word of mouth afterward, like after the fact. He was one of those things that benefited from VHS, Blockbuster, that kind of thing. So, yes, 1997, we had a thing called Blockbuster. It was like Netflix, but you had to go somewhere to get videos. Those were the dark days. Having to leave your house to get videotapes. This does have UK audio description available out there in the world, which is probably the best way to do this film because it is very British anyway. And the Brits don't usually have fun with their audio description, but I gotta say that there was a point where there's there's an American that says England in a really weird way. He's like England, Ingerland, and then the narrator said it the same way. Like there was like text on the screen that said, London, England, and it cracked me up. We don't get enough of that kind of stuff in audio description, and it's just kind of funny, you know. And especially when it's like a Brit that's sort of like echoing it back, like, yeah, fuck you, mispronouncing my country. Yeah, I found this to be kind of silly and fun. It doesn't. Austin Powers is a lot of sight gags, so not everything lands. Not everything is fully described. Sort of like the ending of the film, famously, where they're constantly pulling things out and making things look like really sexual with like the fruit and everything. You got about half of that from what I remember. Not everything. There were some things that they didn't. It's like they felt more comfortable with boob jokes than they did with dick jokes. So like sorry for my crassness. It's very crass. But yeah, they seem to feel a little bit more comfortable making, the references that were the sight gags in place of, where she's holding something in front of her breasts than the ones where Mike looks like he's, doing something downstairs. um, Anyway, and that's true with a lot of other sight gags, like a lot of vagina. She goes behind and you can see her undressing like through a very thin silk screen, which is well audio described, you know. So there, just feel like everything that had to do with women was really well audio described, whereas the stuff with men was, does anybody care? It's Mike Myers. It's kind of goofy looking. It's like, I don't know. You should still probably just describe everything like on an equal level. You just kind of, because this film already, when we look on it in 2024, is going to raise that, is this film problematic question? And to the answer, I would say yes, but that's sort of what it was supposed to be. In and of the time period, it was reflecting a lot on the 60s and bringing that to the 90s. So I was looking at the 60s through the 90s lens. So uh, you're going to look at it and say, um, it's problematic because of that. And it's like, well, he was out of time anyway. That was part of his thing. Like he's from a bygone era. So, and he's also a spoof of something else. So usually when you are doing satire, it's elevated. So whereas something may be a little bit more, suggestive or uh, trying to, slide by with just references in James Bond movies to certain things, a lot of vagina is obviously, like a gag because of Bond villains like Pussy Galore, or Bond girls like Pussy Galore. Anyway, uh, which was a dumb name even when they gave it. You know what I'm saying? Like, so, um, yeah, it's very much, and it has sort of that same beat, but you have to understand the joke. And I think it's sort of the fear and the trepidation that people approach certain films. Like there are people who approach Blazing Saddles now and they go, oh no, this film is offensive. And it's like, it's not, it's kind of what the film was doing at the time. It was trying to point out the other things. Its satire ages really oddly because at the time it reflects on what it's available to reflect on. Austin Powers would be very interesting, and Austin Powers 4 today would be very interesting because he'd be in 2024, likely reflecting on like the 90s version of himself, like what the 90s were like for him, with, I don't know, Jenna Ortega like commenting on it. I'm not going to say the film isn't problematic. This film has lots of problems to it. It's essentially he ends up with the daughter of his former partner simply through time travel, which he admits that he would have liked to have shagged his former partner, but he ends up with partner's daughter, which is weird and creepy. I found that weird and creepy. I think it was like a very similar plot to like Autumn in New York, where, and it's like, it's the same thing with the Graduate themed Rumor Has It with Jennifer Aniston, where she's like flirting with Kevin Costner, who she already knows has slept with both her mom and her grandmother. That's like some of this stuff, like I know there are 5 dudes in a room and no women, and they're like, this movie sounds hilarious. And it's like, yeah, I'm sure it does from a dude's perspective. But from a woman's perspective, it's probably mortifying in many ways. Like, it's like, ew, this is gross. So there were things that were problematic about this in its time period. They didn't need to make Vanessa the daughter for them to end up taking. It could have just been a different agent, like an agent of the time, and they could have just thrown in, his former partner could have just appeared, and 30 years older, and then he's like, ugh, and then made some joke about like, oh, I don't, and she's gonna be like, I'm single now, I mean, like they could have done some other joke with it instead of going the route that they went, but they chose this route, which is icky. Should have been icky in 1997. It was always icky. I'm gonna try and travel to the future so I can, instead of banging you, I'll bang your daughter. Gross. I'm not absolving satire of every single problematic thing with it, but Austin Powers inherently is a problematic character, and that is what he's supposed to be, is somewhat a take on both the time period while also Bond. I mean, there are really some very specific quotes to that parallel Bond. There's a version of that. No, Mr. Powers, where you hear that, no, Mr. Bond, I expect you to die. There's a spin on that. But this is the beginning of the great battle between Austin Powers and Dr. Evil, both played by Mike Myers. And the time travel, he travels from the 60s to the 90s, and he's frozen in time and wakes up and has to fight Dr. Evil again, and it's silly, it's goofy. Some of the comedy still lands, some of the comedy still works because some of the comedy still parodies stuff that has not been removed. You know what I'm saying? Like, those Bond movies still exist. So if you've seen them, they're still able to be parodied. To some extent, you could say the same thing about like The Naked Gun. Most Mel Brooks films are a parody of something. So as long as you know what it is that they're parodying, the thing is still funny, even if you look back on it and go, oh, well, maybe this wouldn't play great in 2024. And it's like, it would probably be different in 2024, but you'd still be parodying the same thing. It's just they're parodying it through a lens of that time period. But they're also, what they're doing is they're elevating and heightening certain things to make them a little bit more obvious. So, is a name like A Lot of Vagina maybe sexist today? Well, so was Pussy Galore, that was kind of the point. So there's a lot of just really brilliant writing here, and just the way that they do things, like Basil exposition always comes in just to like tell Austin like what he's doing, like what the next mission is. So of course his last name is Exposition, which is great. It's a great little aside. Then there's Seth Green is sort of hilarious as Scott Evil, who Dr. Evil doesn't think is, they don't have the best father-son relationship, but like Scott sees a lot of the holes in the plot, and he's always just like being like, well, why don't we just do this? Like, if we just did this, would be so much easier. Will Ferrell appears here briefly in sort of a really funny scene that worked rather well. One of the things I loved from this film, I forgot it did, was, and I've always thought about this, I thought like build an entire movie around this concept, but when henchmen die, it like follows them. So like somebody like at home gets a phone call that this like random henchman died, and so there's like this like wife that's sitting at home, and then she has to tell her son, she's like, you remember Scott? He died. He was rolled over by a steamroller. And it's just like a really dramatic scene that's like totally out of place, but hilarious in and of itself, because it's just like this normal, like idyllic life that this family is leading, where the husband slash stepfather happens to be a henchman of Dr. Evil's, who just happens to have just been killed by Austin Powers. So they get this phone call, this dreaded phone call. So, the humor is here, and they absolutely understood what was funny and what is still funny today, because objectively that is still funny today. Because when you think about how many times random henchmen have died, or agents or whatever, in movies, and it's like, you're always like, you know what, that kid was born, he was like raised, he had toys, he went to kindergarten, he had like friends in kindergarten, he had like a favorite book in 3rd grade. He had a first kiss, he went to prom. And then like later on he just grows up to be like hit by a car in a film. It's just like what is this dude's story? Like, what is his backstory? And who are the people who will then attend this funeral for this guy, for this random spy slash evil henchman? You know, it is like a valid thing to explore that I'm surprised we don't have a whole movie about. Um, that kind of thing. Anyway, uh, so if you want to be angry at it, be angry at it. I'm in the same boat with the Austin Powers franchise like I am with American Pie, although I think this one, American Pie isn't satirizing anything. There were things about American Pie that we should have known in 1999 were uncouth, and it's hard to watch nowadays. But with Austin Powers, with it being a satire, when you're pointing out the things that are wrong about something else and you're doing it in a satirical way, a lot of times those things are going to seem exaggerated and it may not read the right way. But I think a lot of people have taken Austin Powers to be like their spirit animal of sorts, like their guide. And too many people were quoting him, and too many people were dressing as him, and too many guys thought it was cute to do the accent, like, "Are you Randy, baby? Are you? Do I make you horny?" And it's like, I think you missed the boat on Austin Powers. I think you did not understand what this movie was about. I do not think that word means what you think it means. um, so it's funny how many guys looked at Austin Powers who, and then like were like, yeah, this guy, that's my dude, Austin Powers. He got the ladies. No, it's a comedy. Austin Powers wouldn't work in the real world. Stop trying to imitate him. Anyway, so yeah, the first film is funny and has some jokes. I like the second film more. The third film, about the same as the first. I kind of like the whole franchise because like it just has different jokes that work. Not every joke lands, but you know, most of them do. Um, so yeah. Anyway, I'm here because of Spy Who Shagged Me, and whether you decide to check this out or not, cool. Thank you. Let me know what you think in the comments about Austin Powers, and feel free to be offended by it. But it all depends on your generation and if you haven't seen the thing that it's satirizing, this would seem wildly offensive if you didn't know what it was. Taken out of context, I totally agree. If I just showed this to a Gen Alpha right now and they had never seen a James Bond movie and had no idea what the purpose of it, Austin Powers was, I'm sure some of them would be mortified. Just like, what is this? Oh my God. You know, it would just come across as being like way out of touch with the things that they're used to seeing in their streams. But if you show them the James Bond collection and then you show them Austin Powers, I think you get the joke. And even some of the other films that are like this that they reference in the other films, but like in like Flint, stuff like that were referenced. So there are other things that are referenced throughout the Austin Powers franchise. But I'm gonna leave it at that. It's a long review. Check out my other ones of Austin Powers films. I'm gonna give out Austin Powers International Man of Mystery an A-. I like it. It was a good start. It was always weird that it sort of underperformed at the box office because it did work as a comedy in 1997. And it's sort of interesting that they actually rolled the dice and made a sequel off of a $53 million grossing film, because you know there wasn't much profit to be had there. This isn't like the Blair Witch Project where they shot it for like 100,000, 10,000, or whatever they made it for, and then suddenly, like, you know, tons of business at the box office. So they're like, well, the multiplier here is just off the charts. No, like $53 million, it probably made this for close to that. So I don't know, this film really turned that much profit. But who knows? They did it anyway. And maybe cinema was better for it. Spy Who Shagged Me was a great sort of counter-programming at the time to The Phantom Menace. And it knew it. It knew it. And I think that's part of the reason why it succeeded. it was also counter programming to something that was completely opposite it, and the parodies and the commercials of the time period really sold that. So thank you for watching. Thanks for subscribing. And I will see you guys on the other side or in one of the other Austin Powers reviews. One of those two.